The year is 2026. Imagine waking up one morning, looking out your window and seeing it. A colossal shadow swallowing the city skyline. It's not just in your city, but over every major capital on Earth. They arrived without a sound, immense, silent monoliths of impossible design. It's just hanging there in the sky like a judgment. The world held its breath for 3 agonizing days. Then the message came. It wasn't broadcast on our networks or translated into our languages. It was just known. A thought planted in every mind on the planet, as clear as your own name. 1% of your population will be chosen, then we will depart. That was it. No explanation, no criteria, just a single terrifying declaration. 1%. It sounds small, doesn't it? But do the math. 80 million people who would be chosen, and for what? Salvation? A journey to the stars? That's what we all assumed? That's where we went so terribly wrong. The initial wave of global panic was unlike anything history had ever seen. Markets crashed, governments became useless overnight, and every law we had ever lived by seemed to just evaporate. But panic quickly curdled into something far, far uglier. Competition. The message had been simple, but our interpretation was twisted by our own nature. We believed it was a test, cosmic audition. We had to prove our worth. We had to show these silent, all-seeing judges that we were the ones deserving of a place among the stars. The descent into madness was swift. What does it mean to be worthy? In a world suddenly stripped of its rules, the definition became warped. People thought it meant being the strongest, the most ruthless, the ultimate survivor. The fabric of society didn't just tear, it was shredded with glee. Neighbors who once shared backyard barbecues now spied on each other, looking for any weakness to exploit, any advantage to gain. Friends betrayed friends for an extra can of food, convinced that this small act of dominance would be noticed by the silent ships above. The concept of morality was flipped on its head. Kindness was seen as a liability, compassion, a fatal flaw. The news, what was left of it, showed horrifying images. People committing unspeakable acts in broad daylight, not out of desperation, out of a perverse sense of pride, screaming at the sky. Look at me. See how strong I am. Choose me. Families were the first to fracture. The primal instinct to protect your own was corrupted into a contest within the home itself. Parents pitted their children against one another. Spouses turned on each other, each convinced they were the superior genetic specimen. I remember my neighbor, a quiet man named Elias, telling me how he saw his own brother beat a man nearly to death over a tank of gasoline, not because he needed it, but because he thought the display of brutality would earn him a golden ticket. Elias just stood there, horrified, realizing he didn't recognize the person his brother had become. The world had turned into a global arena, and we were all gladiators fighting for the favor of an unseen emperor. The most monstrous acts were celebrated, filmed on phones and uploaded for the world and the aliens to see. Humanity was showcasing its absolute worst, believing it was our best. Then, after a month of this self-inflicted hell, it began. The selection. It wasn't a quiet rapture. From the bellies of the monoliths, blindingly pure beams of white light shot down to the streets below. At first, there was a strange collective cheer. It was happening. The worthy were being chosen. But as the beams found their targets, a chilling pattern emerged. Elias watched from his apartment window as the light found a local gang leader, a man known for his sadistic cruelty who was in the middle of looting a small store. He was lifted into the air, his face a mask of triumphant glee, and then he was gone. Another beam found a corporate CEO who had hoarded life-saving medicine, letting thousands perish just to prove a point about his own power. She was taken. Another found a warlord, another a serial abuser, another a propagandist who had fanned the flames of hatred. The realization dawned slowly, then all at once, in a wave of cold dread that washed over the planet. The people being taken weren't the noble, the strong, or the brilliant. They weren't the ones who had shown leadership or courage. They were the monsters, the cruelest, the most selfish, the most violent dregs of our species. Every single person who had committed an atrocity in the name of proving their worth was being systematically plucked from the earth. The ones who had betrayed, who had brutalized, who had reveled in the chaos, they were the chosen. Elias watched as his own brother, his face finally showing not triumph but pure, unadulterated terror, was enveloped by the light and pulled into the sky. The global cheer had long since died, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. We had misunderstood everything. This wasn't a casting call. It was a harvest. When the last beam of light retracted, the ships stirred. As silently as they had arrived, the great monoliths began to ascend. Phasing out of our atmosphere until they were nothing but pinpricks in the sky, and then they were gone. An eerie quiet settled over the planet. The chaos, the shouting, the violence, it all just stopped. Then, one final message bloomed in the mind of every person left. It wasn't a threat or a promise. It was an explanation, and it was the most humbling, terrifying, and ultimately hopeful sentence we had ever known. You were never being judged for survival. You were being cleansed. Cleansed. That was the word. We, the 99%, stood in the rubble of our own making. We looked at our neighbors, not with suspicion, but with a shared, silent understanding. The liars, the killers, the predators, the architects of our misery, they were gone. All 80 million of them. The world was quieter. The air felt cleaner. The constant, low-grade hum of humanity's aggression had been switched off. We were left with the mess. Yes. We had to rebuild our cities, our trust, our very civilization. But we were also left with a gift, a chance to start again, without the weight of our worst selves dragging us down. The aliens hadn't come to reward the strong. They had come to excise a cancer, and in their terrifying, silent departure, they left us with the one thing we thought we had lost forever: peace. The age of humanity had ended, and the age of humankind had just begun. Thanks for watching. If this story gave you something to think about, consider subscribing for more explorations of the unknown. See you next time.